Hello friends, welcome to Pharma Toppers. Myself Piyush Agarwal, and today I am going to take a lecture on dopamine as a neurotransmitter. So here is my flow of content: introduction, pathways and receptor, Parkinson disorder, drugs. So before moving into the dopamine in detail, we will just discuss a brief synopsis about dopamine. Basically, it starts with the gut to the bloodstream, where L-dopa enters into the brain, and then into the nerve it converts into the dopamine, which is again transported through the axon into its terminal, and thereby the release of the dopamine takes place, and as a result of which synapse occur after the reuptake or uptake mechanisms, and as a result of which the response is achieved. So you could see here there are the many drugs, that is the dopamine agonists, there are the enzymes, that is MAO inhibitors. You could see here the enzyme, that is COMT, that is catechol orthomethyl transferase enzyme, and one more enzyme, that is the dopamine decarboxylase enzyme. So these all enzymes plays a major role in this dopaminergic system. So moving on, dopamine is the most abundant in corpus strata, which is a part of extrapyramidal motor system concerned with the coordination of the movement, and high concentrations also occurred in certain part of the limbic system and hypothalamus, and in hypothalamus it was found to inhibit the secretion of the prolactin. The point to be noted is that the dopamine neuron lacks the dopamine beta hydroxylase enzyme, and thus it does not produce the noradrenaline. So here you could see in this chart conversion of the dopamine into DOPAC, that is dihydroxyphenylacetic acid, as well as formation of a homovanillic acid, which is found in the urine, and which is used as an estimation of the hypertensive disorder in case of a patient suffering from tumor in the adrenal gland. So friends, you could see this diagram where the pathways of the dopamine has been shown, that is Mesolimbic pathway, Mesocortical pathway, Tubular hyperfacial pathway, and nigrostriatal pathway. So starting with the nigrostriatal pathway, it accounts for 75% of the dopamine in the brain and consists of the cell bodies in the substantia nigra, whose axon terminates in the corpus strata. These fibers runs in the medial forebrain bundle along with the other monoamine containing fibers. Now coming to Mesolimbic and Mesocortical pathway, whose cell bodies occur in the group of the midbrain and whose fibers project also via the median forebrain bundles to part of the limbic system, especially the nucleus accumbens and the amygdala nucleus to the frontal cortex. Now the last pathway is tubular hyperfacial system, which is a group of short neurons running from the ventral hypothalamus to the median eminence and pituitary gland, the secretions of which they regulate. The most important point is that they involve in the control of the prolactin, which is inhibited by the dopamine. Now coming to this chart or figure, which is most important in this case, because you see the protein, that is DARPP2, which is a 32 kilodalton dopamine and CAMP regulated phosphoprotein, which is important in the signal transduction pathway. The chart symbolizes that when the dopamine receptor is activated, that is D1, which is an excitatory receptor, activate the CAMP, and thereby PK is activated, and as a result of which phosphorylation of the DARPP32 takes place, and followed by the activation of protein phosphatase type 1, and thus display a role in the amplifying mechanism. So again you could see the dopamine receptor type 2, which is D2, which act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter in this. Coming to next slides, here you could see friends the chart of the D1 and D2 type receptors. D1 and D5 cause the activation of the adenyl cyclase system, whereas D2, D3 and D4 is based on the inhibition of the adenyl cyclase system. The point to be noted is that the D4 receptor, which is involved in the genetic polymorphism with a number of 2 to 10 of 16 amino acid repeated sequence, and expressed in the third intracellular loop, which is connected with the attention deficit hypertensive disorder. So in this chart, the point to be noted is about the cortex, which is involved in the function of arousal and the mood, D1 and D2 and D4 receptor are the main to control it, whereas in case of prolactin, which is distributed in the ventral, so the D2 and D3 act as a functional role in case of the prolactin secretions. Others you could see here the agonist, antagonist, the signal transductions and the effects. Here you could see that the D3 and the D4 receptor are involved in the both pre and post synaptic inhibitions, which depends upon the stimulation or the inhibition of the hormone release. So coming to the next slides, dopamine receptor also mediate the various effects in the periphery, which is mediated by the D1 receptors. Notably, it was found that it is used in treatment of the circulatory shock because of renal vasodilations and the increased myocardial contractility phenomena. So here you could see the motor control is regulated by the nigrostriatal region. Behavior effect is controlled by the mesolimbic and the mesocortical system, and endocrine control is controlled by the tubular hyperfacial system. So friends, also it was found that the D2 receptor is involved in the initiation of the vomiting because of the trigger in the chemotrigger zone, which is a place involved in the medulla in the brain. So these are the experimental models of the Parkinson disorder, in which the unilateral lesion produced by the 6-hydroxydopamine injected caused the animal to turn in the circle towards the lesion site because of the imbalance in the dopamine action in the corpus strata between the two sides of the brain. Conversely, unilateral injections of the apomorphine, which is a dopamine receptor agonist, into the strata cause the circling away from the injection site. And it was found that if apomorphine is given systematically to the normal rat, it causes the no symmetrical or asymmetrical pattern of the locomotion, but if given systematically to the animal with the unilateral lesion of the substantia nigra, found that it causes circling away from the lesion site. This is because of the denervation supersensitivity on one side, followed by the destruction of the dopaminergic terminal, as a result of which asymmetric response occurs in case of apomorphine. So again, animal model in which amphetamine plays an important role. Administration of the amphetamine to the rats, which cause the release of both dopamine and the noradrenaline, causes the cessation of the normal ratty behavior, that is exploration and the grooming, and the appearance of the repeated stereotyped behavior, which is rearing, growing, etc., unrelated to the external stimuli. So the effect could be prevented by dopamine agonist by the destruction of the dopamine contained cell bodies in the midbrain. But the point to be noted is that it is not inhibited by the noradrenergic system. So thus amphetamine induced motor disturbances in the rat probably reflects the hyperactivity of the nigrostriatal dopaminergic system. It also causes the increase in the motor activity. As we know, schizophrenia in humans is associated with the dopamine hyperactivity. So chronic administration of the amphetamine to a few rats in a large colony produces various types of the abnormal social interactions, include withdrawal and the aggressive behavior. So amphetamine and the cocaine, which is an inhibitor of the dopamine transporter, activate the mesocortical dopaminergic reward pathway, which plays a key role in the drug dependence, the main receptor of which involved is D1. So it was found that in transgenic mice which lacks the D1 receptors are generally demotivated and with reduced food intake and insensitivity to the amphetamine and the cocaine. So here this slide deals with the cause and the Parkinson disorder. So oxidative stress is one of the cause of any neurodegenerative disorder, which is a result of excessive production of the highly reactive oxygen species. For example, oxygen and hydroxy free radical and peroxides may be generated as a side product of this process. If unchecked by the reactive oxygen radicals, attack many key molecules like enzyme, membrane lipid and the DNA. So thus the defense mechanism are provided within our body in the form of enzymes, that is superoxide dismutase, catalase, as well as the antioxidants like ascorbic acid, glutathione and alpha tocopherol or vitamin E, which normally keeps any reactive species in check. So some cytokines, especially the tumor necrosis factors, is also found to produce a protective effect by increasing the expression of superoxide dismutase enzyme in the condition called brain inflammation of the ischemia. So Parkinson disease is the first neurodegenerative disorder for which the neurotransplantation was attempted in 1982. Basically, it affects the basal ganglia, is associated with the development of the intracellular protein aggregates known as Lewy bodies, which consist of largely of alpha-synuclein, which is a synaptic protein present in a large amount in normal brains. But mutation of this causes the protein resistant to the degradation within the cells and thereby led to the formation of the Lewy bodies. So the normal function of alpha-synuclein is related to the synaptic vesicle recycling, and that the mutated form loses this functionality with the result that vesicular storage of the dopamine is impaired, and this led to the increase in the cytosolic dopamine degraded, of which produces the ROS and hence the neurotoxicity. Consistent with the alpha-synuclein hypothesis, it was also found that Parkin, which is also a protein, mutation of which leads to the intracellular degradation of the ROC protein and thus involves in the Parkinson disorder. So here you could see, friends, a man with a Parkinson disorder is having symptoms like forward tilt of trunk, reduced arm swinging, shuffling gait with short steps, rigidity and trembling of the extremities, and rigidity and immobility of the head. And others include like tremor at rest, usually starting in hands, that is pill rolling tremor, which tends to diminish the voluntary response activity. Muscle rigidity detectable as increase in resistance in the passive limb movement. Suppression of the voluntary activities or hypokinesia, which is due to the muscle rigidity and due to the inherited inertia of the motor system, which means that the motor activity is difficult to stop as well as to initiate. Parkinson patients walk with a characteristic shuffling gait. They find it hard to start. Once in progress, they cannot quickly stop or change the directions, and thus it is associated with the dementia. So Parkinson disease often occurs during the cerebral ischemia, viral encephalitis, or other types of pathological damage. That is, the symptoms of which includes can be due to the drug induced that reduces the amount of the dopamine by recepin or blockage of the dopamine receptors by chlorpromazine. So it was also found that the cholinergic system is also involved in the Parkinson disorder, and as a result of which anticholinergic drug is being provided. So it affects Parkinson disorder by releasing from the stratum, which is strongly inhibited by the dopamine, and it is suggested that the hyperactivity of this neuron contributes to the symptoms of Parkinson disorder. Basically, cholinergic interneurons of the corpus strata is mainly involved. So in 1982, a group of young drug addicts in California suddenly develops an exceptionally severe form of the Parkinson disorder, which is known to be frozen addict syndrome. And this toxin, that is MPTP toxin, which is involved in it, which was a contaminant in the preparation of a heroin substitute. So it causes the irreversible destructions of the nigrostriatal region, dopaminergic neuron, and as a result of which the MPTP is converted into the toxic metabolite, that is MPP plus, by an enzyme MAOB, that is monoamine type B. So which is taken up by the dopaminergic system and thus selectively act on the dopaminergic neuron and thus inhibiting the mitochondrial oxidation reactions, producing the oxidative stress. So selegiline is employed as a treatment for this. Further has been discussed in next slides. So friends, this figure you could see the pathophysiology of the Parkinson disorder, in which the region mostly involved is the substantia nigra, and pars compacta is the main region from where the dopaminergic neuron enters into the corpus strata region, and any blockage in this neuron or accidentally blockage or due to the oxidative stress causes the Parkinson disorder due to the deficiency of the dopamine, because the signal could not able to transfer into the thalamus and thereby to the motor cortex, as a result of which there is a dysfunction in the motor. So retinol is found to inhibit selectively the mitochondrial function, which causes the Parkinson disorder like syndrome in animals, suggesting that the environmental toxins could be one of the major factor for this. So here friends, you could see the treatment, which is the levodopa as a dopamine agonist, drug that releases the dopamine, which is amantadine, and muscarinic acetylcholinergic receptor antagonist, that is benztropine. Here you could see in levodopa, at periphery there is enzyme, that is COMT which causes the metabolism of levodopa, as a result of which this inhibitor is given, and thereby the levodopa enters into the brain, where it converts into the endogenous dopamine under the influence of enzyme AAD. And also the metabolism of the dopamine occurs so by the enzyme, that is MAO-B and COMT. Thus the inhibitor is also given. So the inhibitor is given because it causes the decrease in the dose of levodopa intake by the 10 folds, and thereby the maximum of the levodopa concentration is available in the brain. Now the involuntary writing movements like dyskinesia, which develops in the majority of the patients within the 2 years of the starting levodopa therapy. So this movement usually affects the face and the limb, and the longer acting dopamine agonist may be less problematic, was found. So rapid fluctuations in the clinical state, where hypokinesia and the rigidity may suddenly worsen for anything from minutes to hour, and thus improves again. So this is considered to be as an on-off effect, which is not seen in the untreated Parkinson disorder patients or with other anti-PD drugs except for levodopa. So this on-off effect can be so sudden that the patient stops while walking and feels rooted to the spot and unable to rise from the chair in which he or she had sat down normally few moments earlier. So the use of the sustained release preparations of the co-administration of the COMT inhibitor, such as entacapone, may be used to counteract the fluctuations in the plasma concentration of the levodopa. The side effects of which is dissolved in the or disappear in the few weeks, is nausea and anorexia. So domperidone could be used as a treatment because it works on the CTZ zone, where the blood-brain barrier is leaky. And second is hypotension or postural hypotensions, and third is psychological effect, which is caused due to the dopamine by the conversion of levodopa into the endogenous dopamine, thus increasing the concentration of dopamine, and the schizophrenia like syndromes like delusions and the hallucinations. So it causes the confusion, disorientation, insomnia, or the nightmares. So coming to bromocriptine, which inhibits the release of prolactin from the anterior pituitary gland, and was first introduced as a treatment of the galactorrhea and the gynecomastia. So, but it is also found to affect in Parkinson disorder, and the duration of which is longer, that is plasma half-life is 6 to 8 hours. So it does not need to be given frequently. It also found to inhibit the growth hormone, which is responsible for the acromegaly, that inhibits the excessive secretions. It was hoped that the bromocriptine might be effective in the patients who had become refractory to the levodopa through the loss of the dopaminergic neuron. The main side effects of the bromocriptine are nausea, vomiting, peritoneal fibrosis. The other dopamine agonist is lyseride, pergolide, dropinerol, cabergoline, and pramipexole. The main side effects of which are confusion, delusion, sleep disturbances. And the most important property of the pramipexole is that it is having an antioxidant property and as well as the protective effect on the mitochondria, and as a result of which it is encouragingly used for the Parkinson disorder patients. Here you could see, friends, just a short note like chart where the transmitter dopamine is involved in a transporter blocker, that is cocaine, mazindol, GPR 12395 and nomifensin. The receptor involved is D1 to D5. Agonist of D1, D2, D3. The receptor mechanism, that is D1 and D5 are GS type, whereas D2, D3 and D4 are GI type, and the selective antagonist of D1 and D2 has been explained. So the chart symbolizes the oxidative stress, that is the formation of the superoxide radical. So here the dopamine is involved in the reaction where it forms the aldehydes together with the H2O2, and this H2O2 is further react with this radical and thus forming the hydroxy free radical, in which semiquinone and quinone is also considered to be as a toxic metabolite. So this chart indicates about the MPTP, as I have already discussed that the heroine consists the MPPP, which is converted into the MPTP, and this MPTP is converted into MPDP plus or MPP plus by enzyme MAO-B, which is inhibited by the paragalin or the diprenyl selectively. And this MPTP is uptake by the catecholamine neurons, and thus forming the dopamine and the norepinephrine, and as a result of which the nigrostriatal cell death. Mazendol is found to inhibit this uptake. So here you could see, friends, this chart. You could see here OCD, that is obsessive compulsive disorder, the symptoms of which is compulsions that are time consuming or cause the noticeable distress with a negative impact on the daily function. The most commonly abused drug is marijuana or the alcohol, which slow down these thoughts. So just comparing this, the dopamine deficit and the serotonin deficit, it was found that the deficiency of the dopamine involves in the Parkinson syndrome and hedonia. And also this involves the depression and craving, whereas in serotonin deficit it was found that OCD like symptoms and impulsivity. So here you could see the mechanism involved is decreased synaptic dopamine, altered dopamine transporter functions, and postsynaptic receptor changes, whereas in case of obsessive compulsive disorder, decrease in synaptic 5-HT, that is tryptophan or serotonin, decrease in 5-HT cell activity, and decrease in the synaptic dopamine. So these are my references. Thank you. For more videos and materials or any queries, feel free to subscribe us at www.pharmatoppers.com.